Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Is the net closing in around Nicola Sturgeon? The COVID inquiry is basically suggesting that she lied, that she covered up, that she issued via her government DNA notices, do not attempt CPR, to not just the elderly, but the mentally ill, the people with learning difficulties, and as we shall see in this piece, even perfectly healthy people. They were ordered by Nicola Sturgeon and her government to not resuscitate people who were ill with COVID. This is tantamount to telling doctors, let people die. Now, these were followed with notes telling the doctors also to not discuss this DNACPR notice with the patient or with the patient's family. So basically, if they come in and they're ill, let them die and don't tell anyone that we've said so. Nicola Sturgeon isn't God. She shouldn't have the right to play God. She's a failed politician. She's not anyone involved with the clinical treatment of patients. And yet she is giving instructions that the doctors are to not just, not try, but deliberately let people die. If these are true, and I have very good reason to believe they are, then Nicola Sturgeon could not only be particularly just evil, she should be arrested, questioned, charged, tried, convicted, and imprisoned for the remainder of her life for, if it is true, the deaths of thousands of people. Now, I did a video yesterday. This isn't a follow-up to this because this is out in the public sphere. But I did a video yesterday, and if you haven't yet seen it, go and watch it. It's a bit long, but go and watch it. Because in there, I show how they had the means, the motive, and the opportunity to dispose of bed blockers and people in old people's homes. And they took those decisions. They cleared over or nigh on 1,000 beds within a month. Something that's never been done before. And then you look at the treatment that they recommended in order to clear these beds, and it was basically euthanizing people. And now we're not only seeing the euthanization of people, we're now deliberately seeing doctors being told not to resuscitate and to let people die. We're going to take a look at this article, but it goes to show exactly the sort of person Nicola Sturgeon is if this is true. Here goes. Right, before we get into this, I will say that Merlin, my source, says that this is absolutely correct. This is according to my source. We discussed this a few days ago. This was something that was mentioned. Merlin has said that they have seen these notes going in. They've seen the notes on records. Merlin has questioned them and was basically fobbed off. With what was non-answers to questions, basically. Nobody wanted to talk about it because I think even the doctors involved, the nurses involved, everyone involved were actually worried about it. They were concerned. Doctors had concerns about it. Merlin told me that they themselves had concerns and questioned the legality of it. But again, no one was explaining or answering questions. But anyway, we'll get into it. This is something that will come out over the course of the thing when I get more that I'm allowed to release from Merlin. But that's for the future. But particularly today, COVID's inquiry's own experts question Nicola Sturgeon's claims on Do Not Resuscitate orders. The research team asks, if the Scottish Government was clear that no one was being pressured into agreeing to DNACPR, why do people report feeling that this was so? It's because it was so, apparently, allegedly, from what Merlin tells me. Research commissioned by the Scottish COVID inquiry has cast doubt on Nicola Sturgeon's claim that the policy of DNR, Do Not Resuscitate, orders did not change. Oh, they definitely changed. Many campaigners believe that the elderly and disabled people had status updated during the COVID-19 pandemic, with medics told do not attempt to save their lives if they fell ill. Some younger Scots have even discovered a DNR or do not attempt CPR form in their medical notes, despite being entirely fit and healthy. Why were they there? They were told, they were pushed, they were shoved down this road. It came from the Scottish Government, and as head of that government, ultimately it is Nicola Sturgeon's decision, her and Freeman. And we know Freeman was positively rubbing her hands in glee at having lost over 1,000 people from beds. Anyway, we saw that in the letter yesterday where she was congratulating everyone and being very smug and happy that all these beds had been cleared, and we know how they were cleared. Now, the Scottish Daily Express can reveal that academics carrying out introductory research and stakeholder engagement for the SNP's public inquiry also raises grave doubts about the use of DNACPR. One report states there is a significant anecdotal evidence during the pandemic of blanket DNACPR forms being used, and of people being informed of a DNACPR form being put in place without their involvement. They weren't involved in this decision, or of feeling pressured to agree to one. There are also suggestions of particular groups, such as people with learning difficulties in care settings, being made subject to a DNACPR that was not clinically justified. If it was not clinically justified, then that is a death sentence imposed. Somebody has done that against medical advice. To do something with medical advice is one thing. To do it against medical advice, any doctor, nurse or any medical professional that put that in immediately needs to lose their standing. They need to be I don't know what, disbarred or whatever it is, taken off the medical register. They should never be allowed to practice medicine again. But ultimately this goes down to Nicola Sturgeon's government. The researchers from Edinburgh Napier University have also uncovered evidence that some of the clinical guidance issued by the Scottish Government on the use of DNACPR in the early stages of the pandemic was both unjustified and discriminatory. Well, of course it is. Hopefully getting rid of those who'd vote unionist. The report also discusses the use of anticipatory care plans, which are put in place to help patients plan for their death, and often includes the point at which DNACPR will begin. On the 17th of March 2020, GPs were told to review, and that was just a week before lockdown, they were told to review the ACP and DNACPR arrangements for vulnerable patients before further guidance on March the 23rd, 3 days before lockdown, telling GPs to consider proactive anticipatory care for those who need it most. In other words, you as the doctor go in and start putting these things in place proactively. You're not talking it through with the patient. The government are telling doctors to put this stuff in place on patients. It is not the government's job to kill people. More updates were sent out over the next few weeks, including one telling Scottish care homes that ACPs should be in place for as many residents as possible. So basically, we need to get as many people in care homes onto this Do Not Resuscitate, so we can make sure that these people, when they fall in, can be allowed to die quickly, and we make no attempt to save them. Because the older people in those care homes tended to be unionists. Also, there were great costs to the government, so they were trying to save money and basically ending the lives of people for political reasons. This is the SNP. This is Nicola Sturgeon. One letter sent to GP stated, for the majority of residents in care homes who have significant underlying health problems and are generally very frail, CPR is unlikely to work if they were to have a cardiopulmonary arrest due to falling ill with COVID, and it would be inappropriate to attempt it because it would be futile and may indeed cause harm and distress. This is a letter from the government, not a medical person, the government, Nicola Sturgeon's government, telling doctors what they should do with the patients in their care. It's the doctor's decision. It shouldn't be a government telling a doctor how to take care of his patient. The government are telling doctors, let them die. Let them die. Let them die. and died they did, in their thousands. The research also notes that a review in England and Wales found evidence of a blanket use of DNACPR and states we are not aware of any similar review in Scotland. In other words, they're reviewing the evidence in England, but the Scotland weren't reviewing it because they want it hidden. They don't want it brought to public knowledge. As concerns about the use of DNACPR began to emerge in public, Ms Sturgeon told one of her daily televised briefings that nobody should be pushed into anything like that, and yet there's the letters to doctors saying proactively do it, force it on people, for even without their knowledge or permission. So she is a liar. She is a liar who's pushed a policy that resulted in the deaths of thousands. The Napier team said Miss Sturgeon must answer key questions at the inquiry, including if the government was clear that no one was being pressured into agreeing to DNACPR, why do people report feeling that this was so? Were people made subject to a DNACPR notice in a way that was unethical, discriminatory or unlawful? Were these notices used for inappropriate purposes beyond their true scope? In response to concerns raised earlier this year, the Scottish Government said, as the First Minister has made clear, the pandemic did not change the use of DNR-CPR forms in the NHS Scotland, and yet that is clearly a lie because they sent the letter saying to push it all the time. Care homes, hospitals, get these patients to get on there, discuss this, or sometimes don't discuss this, just do it. Just put it into files without their knowledge, without their permission. Do not talk to the patient, do not talk to the family, don't talk to anyone. Do it. We need these people finished, ended, dead. Government policy. The Napier team states, it is correct that the general guidance on DNACPR was not changed during the period, but as shown above, how that guidance should be operated during the pandemic was subject to several pieces of advice, and therefore she lied again. 3 other introductory studies by experts at Edinburgh, Glasgow and Birmingham universities also examine the use of DNACPR for the inquiry, although they intend to summarise the evidence already in the public domain. And I do hope Merlin can allow me can give me the I need stuff. The trouble is, I know, and I cannot say, and it's very, very hard, and I don't even want to say now. But Merlin has stuff that I want to be able to release to you, but I'm not doing anything without Merlin's permission. Merlin has the ultimate say, because I need to protect Merlin. But there's stuff that I really, really, really want to show you. Anyway, the Glasgow team notes that there's been no formal evaluation of DNACPR decision making in Scotland during the pandemic in relation to individuals in their own homes, in care homes or in hospitals. The Equality and Human Rights Commission Scotland highlighted concerns about DNACPR forms being applied against the wishes and without consultation amongst those living in care homes. So the Human Rights Commission has been involved with this and has said that they've got the evidence that this happened in care homes. They've even raised concerns over it. So Sturgeon is just a plain liar, and we've got the evidence there that these notices were sent out, basically, in summary, saying all these old people, either knock them off or at least don't attempt to save their lives. Let them die. Let them go. They needed them gone. And that is the SNP. And that is why this woman here, she perfectly healthy, fit, sporty, right? I don't know. I'm going to guess early 40s perhaps. I don't know. But she might even say her name. 44. There you go. 44-year-old. Had a DNA CPR in her notes, and there was nothing wrong with her. Now, that woman there needs to go to prison for this. If this all pans out, and it is true, and we have exceedingly strong belief that this is true, but if this is true, that woman needs to go to prison for the rest of her life for causing the death of thousands of people. She is a bigger, or could be, allegedly, possibly, a bigger serial killer. Her and Jean Freeman are bigger serial killers than Shipman. And that is why, of course, they're called the Shipman sisters. Well, I'd like to see both of them rotting in a cell. What they've done is disgusting. And I'm coming up. As more evidence emerges, and as people give evidence, and as people hand over documents, letters, recordings, that sort of thing, I think a picture will emerge that there was definitely collusion at high level. It may well be, and I've got to be careful with the use of the words, it may well be that the decisions made, whilst not only the wrong decisions, but were made deliberately in that way, knowingly made that way, knowing what the outcome would be, and that it was a political decision to effectively let people, thousands upon thousands of people, die because it was politically expedient to do so. If that's the case, then I think that Nicola Sturgeon and Jean Freeman and others, and you have to wonder about the health secretary at the time, Humza Yousaf, he was undoubtedly involved in some of these decisions as well. So they all need to be investigated. But I think the evidence is coming towards the conclusion that one can only make is that when you look at these people, you realise that they had possibly made a political decision that would have deliberately ended the lives of people. And as for that letter yesterday showing that there was the means, motive and opportunity to clear the beds before the lockdown happened, they gave them motivation of clear beds, of losing people in the care homes and whatever. They gave them means by providing an end-of-life euthanizing care and calling it a COVID treatment and removing any reference as to what it was supposed to be used for, which was things like stage 4 cancer. They removed that and just put it straight into COVID care manual. That was the means. And of course then you have the opportunity by having the government telling the hospitals and care homes and things that they absolutely have to clear those beds, and they gave them a target. So that was the opportunity. Means, motive and opportunity, means to a policeman a conviction. And now we have this coming out where DNA orders were put deliberately into files without patients knowing, without the families knowing, and often against doctors' wishes. It stinks. And I shall finish there. Thank you very much for listening. If you like what you hear and see on the channel, do please hit that subscribe button, and especially do, because if Merlin comes out with more evidence, you do not want to miss it. And also, this is an ongoing story. We really want to cover it. So do please subscribe, and also do please hit the like button. That helps get the story out there. The more likes, the wider it goes, and the more people can become aware that this is being done to them by the politicians they voted for. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and for heaven's sake, don't get treated for COVID if there's anything to do with the SNP involved anywhere along the line. At least check your file to make sure you don't have a DNR in there. And goodbye.